Well, to look at this week's events in federal politics, I'm joined now by three MPs from the different parties. Stephen McKinnon is a Liberal MP for the Quebec riding of Gatineau. Michael Cooper is a Conservative MP for the Alberta riding of St. Albert. And Peter Julian is the NDP's House Leader and an MP from BC. All three of you, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Martin.
Good to be here.
Okay, before you head off to your ridings, first of all, I want to start with the UN. We watched as the Prime Minister presided over the official signing of the Paris Protocol, the Agreement on Climate Change. Stephen McKinnon, I'd like to get your reactions to that. First of all, I guess the question in a lot of people's mind is how optimistic should we be that there will be measures that will go far enough to address this commitment by the fall? You promised an agreement with the provinces by the fall.
Well, I think we should be very optimistic. The Vancouver Declaration of all the provinces and territories with the federal government committed all to work aggressively in that direction. No one ever said it would be easy. We certainly have, and provinces have, other jurisdictions have some choices to make, and we have a lot of work to get through. But let there be no doubt of the will of the leadership of our country, of the leadership of our provinces and territories, in order for Canada to do its part, which is really what this boils down to. Canada has indicated that it will do its part in this worldwide struggle against greenhouse gas emissions and the fight against climate change. And look, I for one am, and I know many Canadians welcome this development and welcome the new tone that Mr. Trudeau and the government have brought to this.
Okay, Michael Cooper, your reaction on behalf of the Conservative Party to the New York ceremonies, the signing by Canada of this agreement.
Well, it's nice that the Prime Minister is off to another photo op. However, it's not so nice that the Liberal government continues to refuse to disclose the cost of the climate change plan. They failed to disclose the numbers during the election, and now they want to hide the numbers. Yesterday, the Parliamentary Budget Officer issued a report that found that average wages will decline between 1% and 3% under the Liberal plan. And on top of that, we know that for the average family, the Liberal climate change plan is going to cost the average family between $500 and $1,000. $500 or $1,000 is a big hit in the average family's pocketbook, especially when you add up all the tax increases in the Liberal budget on families. I think the only thing that can be said about the Liberal climate change strategy is that it is a strategy to raise taxes on everyone.
Okay, Peter Julian, your reaction watching what happened in New York today and the official signing of Canada of this Paris Protocol.
Well, the Liberals love to talk about a new tone, but they are bringing forward exactly the same targets, exactly the same timelines, exactly the same objectives as the previous Conservative government. And climate change actually has to be taken seriously. It's much more than a photo op. Liberals love to do photo ops on climate change. It cost our economy $1 billion last year. We're seeing more and more of these climatic events that are related to climate change. So we do have to take action. We have a government, though, that just loves to do photo ops and is taking the former Conservative objectives and targets as their mantra moving forward. Now, we asked them twice, as you saw today in the House of Commons, asked them twice to give us their targets for the next 3 years in terms of greenhouse gas reductions, and there was absolutely no answer because there is no plan and there are no targets. And I think this is one of the areas where the Liberals think they've pulled the wool over the eyes of Canadians. It's simply not true. More and more environmentalists are speaking out about the catastrophic lack of action of this government, its inability to make a plan, inability to set any targets at all, and in fact, the Liberals are just a continuation of the previous Conservative do-nothing attitude on this issue.
Okay, Stephen McKinnon, I'll put those 2 points to you. First of all, the Conservative, Michael Cooper, makes the point. He raises the PBO, the Parliamentary Budget Officer study this week, came out yesterday, suggests that there could be a cost of about $600 to $1,800 per family in reduced incomes. It doesn't mean your income will go down, but it will be reducing what might have been the growth in your income. There could be a cost to implementing climate change measures to Canadians and to the economy as a whole. Your reaction to that and your reaction to when will we have targets?
Well, I'll start with Mr. Julian. You know, one thing we're not debating is the LEAP manifesto and leaving all of our oil in the ground. The Liberal Party sits, I think, comfortably outside of that seeming consensus in his party. What we also sit outside is the Conservative view that no action is required on climate change and that we just should put up phony numbers. We just should put up phony numbers. What I think both of my colleagues fail to see here is that we are in the middle of a process, and for the first time in recent memory, Canadian leaders have signed up to do the heavy work of getting to those targets and getting to, this is a multi-jurisdictional struggle that we are in, but we're getting to a plan. We're getting to a plan that will come hopefully by the fall, and at the end of the day, Canada will present a credible plan to the world in the fight against greenhouse gas emissions, and that will once again put Canada back in the forefront. And I only have to point you to the reaction of the UN delegates this morning to Mr. Trudeau's speech, wherein they welcomed Canada's new approach, welcomed the kinds of measures that we're taking, and welcomed Canada's message to the world.
Okay, I want to get to something else that happened because we only have a limited time. We have a limited time, so we're going to have to move on to another issue, and that is because this also started today, and I know it's one that all three of you are very interested and very much seized with. And that is the beginning of the official debate of all of you MPs in the House of Commons today, started on doctor-assisted dying, a very serious issue, a very heartfelt issue on all sides. And I'm wondering, Stephen McKinnon, when you look at the bill that your government's tabled, there's still debate to come, there's still answers to come in the debates. Do you feel that, personally, it's a free vote for all MPs except ministers. Do you feel personally, and also on behalf of your constituents, do you feel that you could support the bill?
I do. I am certainly going to keep my ears and eyes open to arguments from all sides of this very difficult question, to the views of Canadians, of course, of my constituents, and the views of all members in the House as we come to grips with, frankly, a very, very difficult issue. I think the government's worked very hard to achieve the right balance here. I think the government has put forward a reasonable bill. Remember that we are debating how we achieve medically assisted death, not if we achieve medically assisted death. And putting and circumscribing that. We've gotten the universal praise of the medical profession and of medical professionals in this country. We have worked very, very hard to rally all affected groups to this bill, and I know that I look forward to the serious with which all members, I think, in the House will debate this issue. Okay,
Michael Cooper, we have had you on this show on numerous occasions already now as your party's deputy justice critic. We've talked about this bill. The minister did stand up, the Justice Minister did stand up and address at some length today the tabling of the bill and the introduction of the bill, Minister Judy Wilson-Raybould. Did she say anything today that helped, because you had some concerns, but you were also heartened by the bill and certain aspects of it. Did anything change in terms of your opinion after listening to the minister today?
Well, I appreciated the minister's comments. As I've said before, the bill is a step in the right direction in as much as it satisfies the parameters set by the Supreme Court, but it's not a perfect bill. There are some shortcomings in terms of protecting vulnerable persons as well as the conscience rights of physicians and allied health professionals. So I hope that the government will be open to amendments to improve the bill.
The minister did also announce today that there will be study of two categories, of two recommendations that were included in the Special Joint Parliamentary Committee. Recommendations that didn't go ahead in the legislation, but she said that there will be study of possible advanced consent and possible medically assisted death or dying for people for psychological suffering. She said that will be studied. Do you take that as positive or negative?
Well, I'm never against studying any issue, but I do think that it is important that the government respect the parameters set by Carter. And I believe that by including persons with only psychological illnesses or moving forward with advanced directives, that Parliament would be at serious risk of going beyond the scope of Carter.
Okay, Peter Julian, I have to ask you, your leader, Tom Mulcair, came out after the weekly caucus meetings this week on Wednesday, and he said, and I believe I may have heard you say this too in the past, but maybe you could weigh in on this. He suggested that the best path of action, this is Mr. Mulcair speaking, would be to refer this whole thing, the legislation, to the Supreme Court for a Supreme Court reference as quickly as possible before actually trying to pass the bill. Is that just his own personal opinion? Do you support that? Is that a party position, and why?
What he suggested, given the context of some disagreement over whether or not this actually meets the test that the Supreme Court put to parliamentarians. And so there's, of course, the very important consultation that has to take place, and we certainly hope the government has seemed open to the kinds of consultations that are going to have to take place as this bill is debated and moves through Parliament, but also to get that reference back from the Supreme Court to indicate to what extent it actually meets the requirements of what the Supreme Court put forward. So it's not either or, it's both, and the consultation is very important. But Martin, I do want to come back to the issue that you mentioned earlier, because the talking points, the Liberals should not be the last point on this. In terms of greenhouse gas emissions, under the Paul Martin government, they signed the Kyoto Agreement and emissions skyrocketed. And we're seeing in the last 6 months, actually, under the new Liberal government, greenhouse gas emissions also have increased. So it's
that was for 2014. That was for the year 2014.
Certainly, we are seeing the same kind of mistakes being made by the new Liberal government that has been made by the old Liberal
Back
government.
onto the assisted, medically assisted dying. So your hope would be that the Supreme Court would agree to hear the case, and that would it would then give the legislators, an extension, because the Supreme Court itself has set a deadline of June the 6th.
Well, the question is whether or not it actually meets the test of the Supreme Court, and to have something back from the Supreme Court would be helpful.
Okay.
As parliamentarians, we're also going to be hearing from people right across the country, and I think all of us, all parliamentarians of every party, take this issue very seriously.
Okay, well, all three of you, I want to wish you a happy and productive week, your week in your riding as you head off to your ridings. Thanks very much for speaking with me.
Thank you, Martin.
Thanks, Martin.
Good to speak with you.